Hello everybody, I'm InTheLittleWood, also known as Martin. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my twice yearly tutorial video. Once every 6-7 months I get a new fixation or I try a new bit of software and I end up making a video about it. Last time 3D modeling, texturing, Minecraft Bedrock Edition. This time around it is making TikToks and using DaVinci Resolve. So DaVinci is a free software. That's the big thing I want to point out. You can give this a try for yourselves for free. There is only one feature today that I'm using, which is more of a time saver rather than like a hard wall to be able to do what I'm creating. It basically just takes out a bit more of the manual process, and I'll flag that up when we get there. So let's get straight into this thing. So we've got my footage here. I'm going to right click and do create new timeline using selected clips. I'm going to untick use project settings because I want to make some adjustments, and it is just the one. I want to tick use vertical resolution because we want to take our footage from this to this, because obviously we're posting it as a TikTok, a short, a reel, whatever else it may be. And the reason for this video, by the way, is I show the behind the scenes of how my stuff is made quite a lot, and people have asked me to document my little tips and tricks and stuff into a single video, which is why we've arrived here. So we're gonna right click, unlink the clips, because I want a couple copies of this footage. Quick duplicate, you can hold left alt and just drag up to make a new version of something. And the reason I've got three is because I want my camera on top, I want to move the gameplay into the right position, and then the bottom layer is for filling in any blank space, which we'll show you in just a moment. What I'll actually do for now is I'll actually disable that bottom one so you see the blank space when it appears. So let's start with the camera. So we're gonna either move around using the transform tool up here to move the camera into position, or if I turn my camera off for a second, you can see on this window I can actually enable transform tools, and I can actually just move stuff around a bit more freely and a bit more sort of one-to-one. Now the issue with this at the moment is that we can see a lot of the gameplay left over here, which we don't want, so we need to crop this. There is a cropping tool in the inspector here in the top right corner, which you can, you know, drag from the bottom and stuff like that. But if you're like me, you may have a slightly off-angled camera frame shape, or you may have a circle, whatever else it may be, so this doesn't quite cover it. So we are going to jump into the color tab, which is just this one down here. A little note on the color tab: even if you've got, say, this bottom clip selected here on video track 1, when you go into the color tab, it always defaults to the top layer. It annoys me. I don't know if there's a way to disable it. If you know, please let me know. But we're in here. We're ready to go. So this is a very scary looking screen, but as long as you don't try and learn every single tool, you're not going to get overwhelmed. There's simple things in here, like you've got saturation, which you can drag up and down, which is this one. So you can see it goes super bold or it goes down to gray. You can do, I don't know, hue shifting to change the colors entirely. You've got things like highlights to change brightnesses and stuff. There's loads of stuff here and it's really simple to understand. But what we're going to be doing, of course, is masking, because I only want my camera frame. So what we'll do is we will put that back to as it was. We're going to click on this one just here, which is it's called window tool. It's basically masking. I'm going to pick the pen and I'm just going to draw on 4 corners here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and close it off, but nothing's changed. You'll notice that over here there was a change. Look, if I Control Z, see how all the gameplay is there? As soon as you close this mask, it all vanishes. But we're not seeing that on this final result. But there's a simple fix for that. So if you open the node tree, if you don't have it open just yet over here, you want to right click and do add alpha output, and then literally just drag blue to blue, and then it's gone. Perfect, we're all good. Let's go back to the edit page then. The next step is going to be moving our gameplay, which is the exact same way we moved the camera before, so we can either do it freely or we can do it in the settings here. And I have 2 states that I like to pop it in. One of them is getting rid of the camera frame entirely and having it just outside of field of view and having the gameplay center on the screen like that. But of course then we have a lot of black space above and below. That works in some instances where I want to show more of the gameplay, but generally for the most part I'm pretty good at keeping the camera central when something interesting is happening. So what I tend to do is I tend to fill up more like 2/3 of the screen with the gameplay, but we are still left with this black space, and that's where our final clip comes into play. So if I enable this again, you can see at the moment as it's playing that, you know, it lines up well sometimes, but not always, and it looks like an awkward afterthought, you know what I mean? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to blur that footage, and I'm going to do that with the blur effect, as you might imagine, but I'm going to do it via an adjustment clip. So an adjustment clip is basically something that you put effects onto and it affects everything else beneath it in the timeline. So we'll demonstrate this right now. So on the effects panel, I've obviously grabbed adjustment clip out. I'm going to go to open effects and just type in blur. and then we're going to grab Gaussian blur and just drag it on. And you can see now that everything is now blurred. Not ideal. We'll move the camera above it. Now the camera's not blurred. We'll keep moving the adjustment clip down to our gameplay and our camera above, and basically our extra gameplay that I left below is now filling up nicely that black space that we had before. And you can still move stuff around afterwards if you want. You can, move the footage up and down to get a better sit, but generally a drag and drop tends to work quite nicely. It means you're not paying too much attention to the top, but it also doesn't feel like something's missing, you know what I mean? And often it can continue kind of the skyline of whatever you're editing quite well. So that's that. Your visuals are now all in place. Now, if you're like me and a lot of other creators, you want to have subtitles on your work. So this feature now is the one that I mentioned. That is the only paid feature that you'll encounter today, but you can still do this manually. It just saves you some time. And by the way, DaVinci Resolve is literally, I think it's like 200 quid, maybe 250. And once you've got it, you've got it. There's no monthly subscriptions like Premiere Pro and stuff like that, which is one of the reasons why I moved over to it. But also as well, I was just sick of Premiere crashing all the time. Since I've been using DaVinci since last summer, I don't think I've had a single crash. It's been heavenly. Anyway, let's get back to it. So we're going to go to timeline and we're going to click on create subtitle from audio. I never touch these extra settings, never do single or double line. I just stick with single. I do change this maximum characters per line though, and I go anywhere between 10 to 18 roughly. So we'll do 12 today, just as a random number. And it does what it says on the tin. It's going to listen to our audio and turn it into subtitles. Now, the only issue is these subtitles here, they don't have any style, they've got no positioning. So that's what we're going to create next. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I will quickly, if I just quickly drag this down a bit, I'm just going to hide this layer for a moment, disable subtitle track, and we're going to create the title and the style that we want to have them appear as. So back in the effects area down here, if you don't have the effects section, by the way, it's just up here. We're going to close that off and I'm going to search for the phrase text, and we're going to get something called text plus. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the intricacies of doing text plus because there's a million videos on it and it's a very simple feature, but I'm just going to basically type in something like template text. I'm going to choose the Minecraft font and I will go to shading, go to select element number 2 and enable that and give it a black outline instead of a red one. One little caveat actually is that when you do the thickness here to increase the size of the outline, when you drag the bar all the way to the right, it just stops at 0.1, but you can type any number larger than that in anyway. So if I did 0.25, that looks a bit more like what I want to work with. So that's pretty good. We're going to click back to settings and we're just going to move this title up to the position I would like to have it. And then we're going to give it a teeny tiny animation. So we're going to go to the very start of it and I'm going to click on zoom and give it a keyframe, which means it's going to be set to a scale of 1 at the first frame. We'll go across using the arrow keys on the timeline, just a couple of frames. We'll set a new keyframe, also of 1. And then when we go back to the start, we're going to set this one to actually be 0.9. So it's going to start slightly smaller and then it'll be at full size after like 4 frames. And that just gives it that little bounce, that little boink kind of feeling to it. So like if I rewind a little bit, press play, boink, it exists, it appears, which is really nice. And that's what you have to do for that. So now we're going to be using a plugin which actually will turn all of these subtitles we created into this style, which is super handy. So you want to create a folder in your media pool called Snap Captions. Make sure that I get the capitalization and everything right, just so the plugin works nicely. There you go. There'll be a link in the description, by the way, to Snap Captions. Very easy to install, really fun to use, and really a massive time saver from somebody called OrsonLord. So thank you to him if he ever happens to watch this. It's an absolute blessing. But what we do is we grab our text plus that we've just made and just drag it in there, and now it exists there. Could rename it, call it template text if we wanted to. And then all we have to do next is get rid of the one in the timeline, go to workspace, scripts, comp, and snap captions. And then because we've got our folder there, it's immediately found template text. I'm going to set everything to be in uppercase. I'm going to remove all punctuation, and I do like to fill the gaps. So I always crank my number up quite high because I like to fill any blank spaces. Some people like it where the titles appear and disappear immediately after the text is gone. But if I set it to something like, I don't know, 40 frames after the text is finished, I press generate and you can see immediately that it's just scanned through and immediately swapped out the subtitles to be our style titles. And already at this point in the video, we're basically done. Like, this is what 80%, if not more, of people will want when it comes to turning their horizontal content into vertical content, which is brilliant. What we would like to do, though, is save ourselves some time, so we're not going to have to do every single one of these steps every single time. So, back in the effects manager, we're going to grab another adjustment clip and drag it onto the timeline. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on my camera here. I'm going to do Control-C for copy. We're going to go to the adjustment clip. I'm going to right click and do paste attributes. Because I use this so often, I've actually got a keybind for Alt-V if you ever want a suggestion for a keybind. And inside of here, we just want to tick video attributes, so it ticks everything here. So that is going to take the animation, the position, it's going to take the zoom, it's going to take the color correction, everything like that. The one thing I do untick is real-time effects, or retime effects, sorry, because I've noticed that actually will match the length of the original clip, and obviously if it's shorter or longer each time, then it moves stuff, and I don't like that. So we press apply, and all we have to do now is get this ready to be used in all future projects, which is why over here we've got these little things called power bins. So this is your main bin, your media pool for this project. But if you want these templates to carry through to every single project, it's as simple as coming to the power bin, right clicking, making a new bin, and just calling this tutorial 2. You go inside of here, drag your adjustment clip in, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, camera position. All right, and then we're going to do the same for this as well. So new adjustment clip onto the timeline, copy our gameplay position, do my Alt-V, press apply, drag that one up, call that one gameplay position. There we go. And then actually this one is already working as intended, so we'll just drag that one up and just call it gameplay blur. There we go. Lovely. All right, so now you're going to see just how quickly you can make a project when you join in. So once you've loaded up your project, you've got your footage in the timeline, you want to grab your power bin and bring it into the main media pool. That's the first step you'll do on new projects. So we'll drag our footage into the timeline. I'm going to unlink it, make my copies like I did before. I tell you what, I could always throw down the blur one straight away. So I'll do that real quick, get that one in position. And then I'm going to grab, let's go for camera position first, because we'll see that immediately represented. And then we're basically reversing the process. So I'm going to copy from the camera position. I'm going to do Alt-V or paste attributes, press apply, and immediately it's in the right place. Amazing. We're going to do the same for gameplay position. So drag it in, copy, paste attributes, bam, and there you go. We've recreated those steps real quick, real fast. And then of course you would repeat the steps for doing the subtitles and the styles for your captions. But again, much like a lot of people, I have a power bin of different subtitle styles for snap captions. So all I would normally do is just drag that in at the start of the project, much like this one, and I've got everything there ready to go, which is brilliant. Now, if you're like me, you probably want this to be even more efficient if possible. And I did look into scripting and things like that and creating a custom effect that will appear in this effects window. But the way that effects work is it will apply the effect to the rectangle that is visible, but it will ignore everything outside of it and almost make it like a new, almost like a nested sequence, I guess, which is a bit naff. But the solution I did find is actually using the Fusion tab. So if I drag in another copy of this gameplay, starting fresh, and we're going to click on the Fusion tab down here, and this is basically the equivalent of After Effects. And it has this thing called the node tree, which is basically how you do everything. And it looks a bit complex and a bit scary at first, but I'll show you what I've got, and you'll probably think, yeah, I'll invest the time to learn this. So if I do Control Space, I've got two presets, one that's called Full and one that's called Center. If I go for, say, Center and pop that in there, you'll see that immediately that has just set up the scene. Look, if I go back to here already, everything's in position already. Brilliant. What you do lose to an extent is the ability to move each of these objects. So instead, if you want to, you can save it as a template and you can drag it over here so that each time you can drag it in and kind of have a fresh start on this. So you can see that this is what my typical one looks like. And I'll run you through this because I know it looks a bit wild, but it is so unbelievably simple that I think you'll be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So we've got the original video clip, super simple to understand. Then we've got another version of the video clip and we put a blur on it and then it gets merged in. So these merge nodes are really handy because it allows you to basically squidge everything together and become one single piece. After that, we have got another copy of the gameplay and we've got transform. So this is the actual gameplay. So look, that one's that one. And of course, the Gaussian blur is the big one at the back. And then this one has one extra step on it, and it's got a polygon. So this one is actually for the camera frame. So of course, the camera frame is normally sitting over here. So what we do is we apply a polygon first, which is basically the equivalent of the masking we did in the color correction. Once you've got that, we then obviously add a transform to it to move it into position. So you can see the camera is just separate and loose. And then my personal preference was adding my camera frame in afterwards, because where typically I'm pulling these clips from Twitch, the quality of the camera isn't that nice, as in the camera frame, should I say, it's quite blurry. So I've actually quite liked dragging in my camera frame into here, either using a loader node. So if you do control space and do loader, that's one way of doing it, or you can literally just open File Explorer and drag it anywhere into this window and it will appear there, which is super useful. But again, camera frame, transform to move it into position over here, and then of course another merge to just bring it all back together, and then that final merge goes to media out, because that is what is going to appear on the timeline. That is what the clip will look like. And also a little tip with this one, by the way, for ages I couldn't understand why nothing was appearing here when I was making my trees. If you just tick that tiny little yellow white dot on the right hand side, it'll appear on the right, and if you tick the one on the left, it would appear on the left, which is super useful. So if you want to look closer up and then you want to have one that's zoomed a bit more out, you've got that choice. Or you can even do it at different steps of the process. So this one is only looking at the camera frame, or this one's only looking at the polygon, so you can see the mask that I made. So there's a lot of versatility inside of Fusion, which is really powerful. So we go back to the timeline, and look, there you go. That's everything done in one click for the visuals, and then the subtitles would be what, 2 clicks, 3 tops? So it really streamlines and simplifies the process, which is pretty cool. Now, one other trick that I use is actually utilizing color to represent different people that are speaking in the video. So if I've got my usual subtitle, which is this one, which has black stroke, a bit of a drop shadow, which matches my camera frame usually. And if I layered another one on top, even if I move it down further on the page to be there, that could be confusing. So how do we change this color? Well, you could have a whole separate text template and then go ahead and actually recreate the snap captions twice over, but it's a lot of work. It's kind of unnecessary. So instead what I do is I select this title here, the extra one. I'll go into the color tab, and then I'm literally just using the hue shift here. So if I zoom right the way into it, you'll see that as I'm moving the hue shift, it actually changes the color to a purple, a beige, a orange, whatever I want really. And you can use the color tab to basically manipulate this. This is a very specific use case, I will say, because my titles are hard black and white with an accent color. So this might not work for all setups, but it's just personally what I do. I'm only showing you how I put my stuff together. But if you want to save that color for future use, so say I go for where's an orange? There you go. If I wanted to save an orange, all I have to do is right click here, press grab still, and it appears just up here. Then, much like a power bin out in the edit timeline, we have power grades. So I'll delete this old one from a previous tutorial attempt that I did. And all you have to do is from this one, just drag it onto power grades, and then you've got it here for every project ever. And it is literally a simple case of dragging and dropping. So you've got blue drag and drop, pink drag and drop, orange drag and drop, and it just works immediately. It's awesome. And then of course, as you might expect, you can copy this over to all your other subtitles if you wanted, with just the regular old copy paste and using the attributes. Because typically what I do on my timeline is I'll always have me at the lowest level of subtitles, person 2 on the second layer, so on and so forth. And then all I do is I do the color grade on one of them, and then of course Control C, select all of those ones, add in only the color correction to not overcomplicate things. And now each of these all has the orange drop shadow on it, which is pretty cool. So that kind of streamlines that process. The only other thing that I sometimes do with my projects, my TikToks and stuff, is if I do happen to have audio that is split out on different levels, I tend to only ever do this on vocals rather than gameplay and music. But I really like using a compressor, and it's really simple to use. So we're going to go into the Fairlight tab, which is basically the audio editor of DaVinci Resolve. And basically, if you go to track 1 or audio 1, go to effects and press add, you go go to Dynamics and press Multiband Compressor. This is what it looks like by default, and this is basically the one that I use for vocals. It's called Soft Broadcast. I think I might have named that myself, and I also have Broadcast as well, so either or, there's not much difference between the two of them. And that's it, and then it's applied to the timeline. And then what I do, just to make sure the audio doesn't get too loud, too crackly, too distorted, is I go over to Dynamics on the bus. So the bus is like the whole project rather than just one track. And I add the effect that's under Dynamics, which is called Limiter. And this one's called Martin Limiter. It's just ceiling set to -1, release of 0.5, and then I haven't touched anything on this third one. And I just find that if you've got a relatively quiet stream or your voice is quiet compared to your gameplay, it's a good way of beefing everything up really, really fast. And I'm pretty sure that is everything. We can go ahead and obviously export this if you want to. So I click on the delivery tab, which is the little rocket. My settings are custom export. I think it pretty much comes as is. I've got everything on default except for format, which I changed to MP4. I have encoder and H.264 as the R. And then I usually just leave quality on best, you know, automatically. Some people like to restrict it to say 30 or 40,000 because that seems to be YouTube's kind of quality threshold if you're doing it as a short, but that's basically it. Add to render queue, hit render, and away you go. And that is basically how I put my TikToks together. So I've managed to streamline the process down to 1 click when necessary, when I don't feel I need to move the camera or the gameplay around, and then to 2 or 3 clicks for each timeline piece when I want to do something where I might want to say move the camera around, or you know, if I want to blow up the camera for emphasis to catch a face reaction. So that's why I normally edit like this. I don't use the single track method that often because I find it quite restrictive. But yeah, if that was helpful to you, then great, amazing. It's just somewhere I can point people now to say, oh, this is how I do it. If you've got any questions about other effects or tricks or magic that you've seen me do in my recent shorts, reels, or TikToks, then feel free to ask me in the comment section below, and I will see you all next time. Happy creating. Bye.